Most people think the traffic stop begins when the officer steps out of the car and walks toward you. That's the moment you notice. That's the moment your heart rate spikes. That's the moment you start thinking about what to say. But the truth is, the traffic stop actually begins before the officer even opens their door. And those few seconds where they stay seated inside their vehicle, that quiet pause you're watching in your mirror, that's not hesitation. That's calculation. Let me ask you something. The last time you saw a police car behind you or got pulled over, what did you assume the officer was doing while sitting in their car before approaching you? I want you to answer that in the comments because most people think it's something simple. Maybe they're just checking your plate or writing something down. But what's really happening in that moment is far more deliberate, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a traffic stop the same way again. So, go ahead, drop your answer in the comments, and then stay with me. Because what I'm about to explain will completely change how you behave the next time you see those lights behind you. Here's the reality: most drivers never get told. When a police officer pulls you over, they don't rush out of their car for a reason. It's not laziness, it's not delay, and it's definitely not random, it's strategy. Because from the officer's perspective, stepping out too early without information is one of the biggest mistakes they could make. Think about it like this. You're sitting in your car, looking forward, maybe checking your mirrors, maybe reaching for your documents, but behind you, inside that patrol vehicle, the officer is already building a mental picture of who you are, what kind of situation this is, and how cautious they need to be. And they're doing it before they say a single word. The very first thing that usually happens is a plate check. That license plate on the back of your car isn't just an identifier, it's a gateway. Within seconds, it can tell the officer who the vehicle is registered to, whether it's stolen, whether the registration is expired, and sometimes even if there are alerts connected to that vehicle. Now here's where things start to get interesting. That information doesn't always match what the officer is seeing. Maybe the car is registered to someone else. Maybe the registered owner has a suspended license. Maybe the vehicle has been flagged before. None of these things automatically mean you've done anything wrong, but they change how the officer approaches the situation. And that's why they wait. Because walking up without that context would be like walking into a conversation without knowing who you're talking to. Now, while that system is loading and returning information, something else is happening at the exact same time. The officer is watching you. Not casually, not out of boredom, but very intentionally. Your mirrors are giving you a view of them, but their windshield is giving them a view of you. Are you sitting still? Are you turning around repeatedly? Are you reaching into different parts of the car? Are your passengers moving in ways that seem coordinated or chaotic? These observations matter more than most people realize, because they help answer a question the officer is constantly asking in their mind. Is this situation predictable or unpredictable? Predictable situations stay calm. Unpredictable situations require caution, and caution changes everything. Now, let me paint you a very real scenario. A driver gets pulled over. The moment the car stops, they start searching through the glove box, then the center console, then under the seat. From inside the car, it feels normal. They're just trying to get their documents ready. From behind, it looks like rapid, repeated movements into areas that are not fully visible. The officer doesn't know what you're grabbing. They only know that you are grabbing something, so they wait. They observe longer, they gather more information before stepping out. Because once they leave that patrol car, they're physically exposed. And that's something most drivers never think about. The patrol car is not just transportation, it's a layer of safety. Inside that vehicle, the officer has visibility, communication tools, and a barrier between them and the unknown. The moment they step out, that barrier disappears. So they make sure they're as prepared as possible before doing that. Now, here's where it gets even more detailed. During that pause, the officer may also be running your plate through multiple systems, not just one. Different databases can return different kinds of information. Some systems show basic registration. Others show alerts, prior incidents, or notes that may not be obvious at first glance. Again, this isn't about assuming guilt. It's about reducing uncertainty. Because uncertainty is what creates risk. Now think about how this connects to what you're doing in your car. Every movement you make is part of the picture they are building. If you're calm, still, and predictable, that picture becomes clearer. If you're moving constantly, looking around nervously, or doing things that don't match a normal pattern, that picture becomes unclear. And when the picture is unclear, the officer slows down. That's why they don't get out immediately. They're not wasting time, they're buying clarity. Now, let's shift slightly because this next part is where most drivers unknowingly create problems for themselves. You've probably seen people say, just get your license and registration ready right away. Sounds logical, right? But here's the issue. If you start reaching into multiple compartments before the officer approaches, you're creating movement that they can't fully interpret. And interpretation matters because they don't know your intention. They only see your action. So instead of helping, you might actually be increasing their level of caution. And increased caution often leads to a slower, more controlled approach, which is exactly what most drivers are trying to avoid. Now, let's go deeper into the mindset, because understanding this changes everything. Officers are trained to think in layers. What do I know? What do I not know? What could go wrong? And how do I minimize that risk? That thinking process doesn't start at your window. It starts the moment the stop begins. And that's why those few seconds in the car matter so much. They're not empty. They're full of decisions being made quietly. Now imagine two different drivers. One pulls over smoothly, keeps their hands visible, and stays still. The other pulls over quickly, starts moving around, checks their phone repeatedly, and looks back multiple times. Same road, same situation. But the officer's approach will not be the same, because the information they gathered before stepping out is completely different. Now here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. Once the officer forms that initial impression, it doesn't just disappear. It follows the rest of the interaction. It shapes how they speak, how they observe, and how they respond. So if the first impression feels calm, the stop usually stays calm. If the first impression feels uncertain, the officer remains more alert throughout. Now, let's talk about time again, because this is where drivers start overthinking. You're sitting there, watching, waiting. 10 seconds feels like a minute. A minute feels like 5. And the longer it takes, the more your mind starts creating stories. Something must be wrong. They found something. This is getting serious. But in reality, that time is often just the process working exactly as it should. Checks take time. Information takes time. Decisions take time. And rushing that process would create more problems than it solves. Now, here's the part I want you to really pay attention to, because this is where everything comes together. The officer doesn't step out of the car until they feel ready. Not just ready to talk, ready to handle whatever situation they believe they're walking into. And that belief is shaped entirely by what they saw, what they checked, and what they observed during those first few moments. So, when you're sitting there wondering why they haven't come up yet, remember this: they're not waiting. They're preparing. And while they're preparing, they're watching you just as closely as you're watching them.